everybody, and welcome to Leading Entrepreneurs of the World. I'm Stelios Hatzakis, CEO of One Business World. Leading Entrepreneurs of the World features entrepreneurs, founders, and business leaders presenting on cutting-edge topics and the latest industry developments. Today, we're very pleased to welcome global entrepreneur Ali Mostashari. Ali is a co-founder of LifeNome, a precision health AI company headquartered in New York City. Concurrently, he serves as a member of the Global Futures Council and the Global Innovator community of the World Economic Forum. Prior to LifeNome, Ali was an associate professor and program director at the School of Systems and Enterprises at Stevens Institute of Technology, where he directed the Institute's Smart Cities Initiative and Systems Thinking Research. Ali has also served as a lead program manager and strategic resource manager, respectively, at the United Nations Development Program in New York City, overseeing a development portfolio of $1.2 billion. At LifeNome, Ali and his team leverage biological, physiological, and behavioral data to hyper-personalize needs assessments and health and wellness interventions in the preventative health, nutrition, fitness, insurance, and personal care and beauty industries. An award-winning precision health AI company based out of New York, LifeNome was founded with the singular goal of improving the health and well-being outcomes for every individual on the planet through science and technology. By using cutting-edge science and AI, the LifeNome team has helped some of the world's largest companies offer their customers the most effective products and services personalized for them based on their unique needs and also their unique genes. Precision health is an emerging area of preventative healthcare that leverages the power of artificial intelligence, big data, and systems biology to develop hyper-personalized risk and needs assessments, recommendations, and products based on an individual's unique biology, physiology, and lifestyle. Today, Ali will provide an overview of precision health, the state of the science, its applications within nutrition, fitness, beauty, insurance, and healthcare, and the challenges we need to overcome to make it mainstream. Ali, it is great to have you here with us today to hear more about this very interesting and fascinating topic. Welcome to Leading Entrepreneurs of the World.
Thank you so much, Stelios. I'm very happy to be here, and thanks for the introduction. Today, I just wanted to kind of bring up the overall topic of preventive health and well-being and how that can be changed through precision. And I'm not going to talk much about what we do at LifeNome, but focus more broadly on what's being done out there and where the state of the science is collectively as an industry. So just to get the overview of what I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to talk about what precision is, what the opportunities are, what the state of the science is, and what the ethical implications are for humanity as we go forward in this direction. And a lot of the things that I'm going to say are going to be basically up to today, March 2021. And because this video is being recorded, just to date this particular presentation into the context, given that the science changes very, very fast in this area and new things come up all the time. So what is precision? So precision, and I put precision X because many different topics can go after precision. So precision nutrition, precision beauty, and other things. Basically, precision X is a world where your health and well-being choices are hyper-personalized based on your unique biological, physiological, and lifestyle characteristics, as well as your environmental characteristics. So if you think about what that means, it means that we take information on your biology, on your physiology, on your lifestyle and environment, and we leverage artificial intelligence and big data to provide you with highly personalized choices that reflect who you are and address the unique needs that you may have across many different dimensions of your life, including nutrition and diet, fitness, sports and exercise, beauty and personal care, pregnancy and parenting, most importantly, preventative health, but also some future fun stuff that I'm going to talk about that is currently in the sci-fi kind of section of our scientific endeavors, but are interesting to think about philosophically, and that is it possible to personalize how people find mates, how they engage in education and in career choice. So I'm going to first start with the nutrition and diet side in terms of what do we know, what can we do, what is possible today. So in nutrition and diet, currently, what we can do based on the unique biological characteristics of the person, and this can be the combination of DNA, microbiome, proteomics, and other data sources that we have on the biology of the individual, we can basically have a better understanding of how that individual uniquely processes vitamins and minerals, their unique metabolism, what kind of diet is more likely to work on that person versus others, potential sensitivities and allergies they may have, how they taste particular things, particular flavors, which is extremely different across individuals. For example, some individuals who feel that green leaf vegetables are extremely bitter are sensing a particular aldehyde within that particular vegetable, whereas others do not have that sensitivity. And that changes what that person eats, and we think that's a behavioral issue, but it's really a biological issue in disguise. Food ingredient interactions with biology, how different food ingredients are absorbed into the body, how they're processed, this is all determined by the biology. And whether a particular function of food is effective for a person or not, again, is determined under biology. And currently we can assess these kinds of particular personalization characteristics. And it is possible that soon you could see the impacts of that, where food retailers would offer you different assessments of which products in their aisles are better for you across different categories. Within restaurants, you could choose menu items that are best for you. In meal deliveries, you could have those personalized to your particular needs. In terms of supplements, getting personalized supplements that have the exact dosage that you need for your body. And in terms of packaged foods and functional foods, personalized foods just designed for you, meaning that instead of it being a more mass generic production, it would be highly personalized to your unique needs. In terms of what the science is, we have pretty much fair evidence, and fair evidence is in science, we want to always be more on the conservative side and not be on the marketing side where we say the amount of information is at a solid evidence level. We expect it to be at a solid evidence level within the next 5 to 10 years. So we have a good starting point. Generally, we are at a stage where we're somewhere between some evidence and fair evidence. One can get started on the journey of personalization scientifically when you then tell very transparently the end customer what the claims are and what you're actually kind of presenting them with and what the science actually says. And most of the time when you are somewhere in between some evidence and fair evidence, you have statistical indications that a particular group of people with a particular biological background is more likely to have a particular trait than another. And those clinical studies you may have, but then that's at the population level. To be able to say whether a particular individual has that need requires a little bit more data and science. And that data cannot be gotten in any other way other than observing that individual within their daily lives, providing them with these personalized recommendations, and then having a feedback loop where we capture that data and then basically ensure that we have much better data over time. So our knowledge and science improves as we provide those recommendations and get feedback from customers and from end users about the effectiveness of the recommendations. The next area, which is interesting, is the area of fitness and sports and how our unique biology plays into that. The ability to create, when you go to the gym, basically there's particular sets that are recommended by everyone, for everyone, but that's not necessarily always useful. What's interesting is to see whether we can create a smart gym for where a person knows which equipment to go on based on their unique needs and based on how their body is actually evolving over time. And that's not just biology, that uses also the physiological data that we can get from wearables and the lifestyle data that we get from individuals. All of that data can be layered on top of each other to provide what would be really a smart gym experience The same thing, think about a Peloton or a home equipment, gym equipment that actually knows who you are when you're sitting there, not just assume that you do some settings and you say, I'm 5'11" or I'm this weight or that weight, but it actually understands you at a biological level and can help you address your muscle structure that's very, very unique to you. So the kinds of things that are genetically influenced and biologically influenced in general are your physiological responses, fitness benefits on your health outcomes, your muscle structure, whether you're more of a power athlete or an endurance athlete or both, potentials for injury, for joints, ligaments, muscle structure. Again, a lot of that is biological in nature, your base metabolic rate, and whether you have that potential, initial potential, physical potential to become an elite athlete. And where you might see applications of that, again, in terms of gyms and home gyms, personal training, it becomes really personalized training even further, where the individual can tailor different exercises for you. You will probably see this in fitness apps, integrating that into the experience that they provide for individuals. And then more on the professional side, you will see that in athlete training, recruiting rosters, and also in terms of providing athletes with the best possible nutrition. Here, the evidence is between some evidence and fair evidence. Part of that is that it's harder to measure some of the more intrinsic things that are easier to measure on the nutrition side. On the nutrition side, we can actually measure a person's serum level, vitamin levels, or we can see whether a particular weight loss diet actually has effectiveness or not, whereas on the fitness side, it's sometimes harder to measure the outcomes. And because of that, we're somewhere between some evidence and fair evidence, and still it makes sense to start on the personalization journey. The next area is the area of beauty and personal care. And that area consists of primarily focusing on skincare and hair care. Those are the most advanced in terms of science that we currently have, but there's also some interesting understandings of oral care, and some more limited understandings in terms of impact of cosmetics and fragrances. The most difficult aspect of personalization is the fragrance, because there are more than 400 receptors for how we perceive scent. And it's very hard to kind of look at which biological combinations may have a correspondence to particular scents. So that's going to be, I think, one of the last areas within beauty that is going to be impacted is fragrances, but it's an interesting area. What's also tough about fragrances is most of the time you wear a perfume. If you wear a perfume or a cologne, you don't after a while perceive that scent anymore, but people around you do. So the question is it good for them? Is the personalization for you, or is it for them because they're perceiving it rather than you? So it gets it into even more complexity. The areas, though, where you're going to see a lot of impact is going to be skin and hair care. And here you can basically look at particular skincare characteristics such as skin dryness or scalp dryness or hair breakage, the amount of proteins in a particular hair follicle that you may have, and whether you require more extensive treatment than others. But also the ability to screen different ingredients to see which ingredients are most effective for your skin and hair versus others. Also, something that's quite interesting is the ability to look at the nutrients that are needed for both skin and hair, and how we can design those to help on the inner beauty side rather than just the outer beauty and outer health side of things. And then the last area would be the area of oral care. Again, there's a lot of interesting research and clinical studies where we have data on the differences between different individuals, propensity to have good oral health care, or whether they're more likely to have bad teeth and that may have impacts on their tooth health. So this kind of allows us to do more personalized treatments. And again, this is an area where we have between some evidence and fair evidence. And part of that is not just because of the biology or genetic side of it, it's also because of the skin and hair care industry structure, which makes it difficult to measure outcomes. So a lot of times for skincare products, for example, people say, my skin feels better after this particular skin intervention. And most of the results that you see publicized by beauty companies are very much subjective data rather than mostly objective data. It's harder to get objective data from individuals in order to see the effectiveness. And that makes that difficulty of measuring the outcomes makes it also difficult to measure whether a particular assessment or intervention can be validated easily. The next area, one that I'm very much interested in because it basically targets two people at the same time, is the area of pregnancy. Of course, as I discussed in the nutrition side, the ability to look at what the micro and macronutrient needs of a pregnant woman are is very important. The ability to predict potential pregnancy complications, focusing on specific characteristics on ovulation fertility, the ability to keep a woman's weight within a specified range, given their particular metabolism and special needs, and also looking at who is more likely during pregnancy to experience more mental stress than others. Again, those are biologically influenced, and so is lactation and breastfeeding needs. So the quality of milk is actually impacted both by gut microbacteria, but also by some genetic factors. And of course, the same skin and hair care needs specific to pregnancy, things such as, hair, having hair fall out. We will know better who is more likely to have experienced that than individuals, but just general individuals during pregnancy. And the same for stretch marks, for example, when people give birth, whose skin is more likely to develop stretch marks. Again, interestingly, a lot of that genetic. And of course, the area of baby nutrition needs. And this is more, again, this is on the side of fair evidence. So more evidence is available there for us to be able to look at interventions. And after that, the preventative health side. And again, in this presentation, I'm not focusing on precision medicine. Precision medicine would be how does your body focus on process particular medications, and to which ones does the body respond more, and which ones are there potential side effects, where is efficacy within that particular drug. Those are within precision medicine. What I'm discussing right now is primarily one step before that. That's before the onset of the particular disease. And that is basically to kind of take a look at, is a particular person more prone to a particular chronic disease? How would they lose weight? What would be the optimal way to make them lose weight? And some of those, in addition to being just biological, are also behavioral issues. What's quite interesting about behavioral issues is some of them are driven by our biological impulses within our brain structure. And understanding who has what sort of impulses that they have to contend with will allow us to come up with behavioral change and lifestyle change programs that work for individuals in the way that their brain is structured. So not everyone has the same motivation or the same ways of incentivizing themselves. And some of that has to do with, for example, our hormonal balances and what hormones get produced or don't get produced. In many instances, there's this a study, for example, on exercise aversion, which is highly genetic. So the individual who wakes up early in the morning and doesn't want to change, doesn't want to go and work out, and therefore is likely to kind of have a higher risk of chronic disease. Generally, we would attribute that to personal choice, but there is actually an interesting study that looks at whether a person gets exercise rush when they actually do exercise. So do they feel better when they do exercise? And some people just don't feel the rush. And when you do not feel the rush, you actually, your mind doesn't remember that as a positive thing or as a reward. And therefore, the only thing that you see at 6 a.m. on a cold winter day is you can just project the tiredness and the difficulty of exercising rather than thinking, last time I went, I enjoyed it so much. So there's that aspect, which is interesting because we never think about our behavior being biologically directed, whereas a lot of it is. Again, looking at weight loss programs, looking at our particular functional foods and functional foods are foods that have an effect on the health outcomes of the individual. They're not just for nutrition, they're not just for fulfilling calorie needs, but they actually have positive health outcomes on the individual. And not all functional foods work for everyone. So understanding what works for whom and how becomes pretty critical. And then there's issues. So what we expect to see is in the next couple of years, when you go to the doctor for a preventative health visit, that they will look at your predispositions. They will look at all the different potential risks that you may have, potential needs that you may have on a personal level, and then they will provide you with much more personalized recommendations with regards to how to change your lifestyle, take into consideration, again, those behavioral tendencies and many other areas. The ability to predict who is more likely to get chronic diseases before they get it allows us to have preventative health programs that target that particular population. This is particularly true for insurance companies who don't want to be stuck with a person's high bills for their chronic diseases. Just to get a sense, around 60% of premature deaths in the US are due to chronic diseases that could have been prevented. So there's a lot of ability to reduce that risk by knowing beforehand who's more likely to be on that path and helping them change their behavior before they get there. And the same thing with regards to cancers. Of course, we cannot it's too expensive to screen for all sorts of cancers at all times. But if we have a sense that a particular person is more likely genetically, and with the combination of genetics and their lifestyle, if we know that they're smoking and they have particular genetics, and we know that they're drinking and they're in a polluted area, it's more likely for us to have a risk assessment that tells us this person is more prone to developing cancer than another person, allowing us to do screenings that are targeted to that person. And again, what COVID, we're working on some of the aspects of COVID and the impact of genetics on COVID and the impact of lifestyle on COVID, and we actually understand why there's some differences in terms of response of some people with regards to how their immune system is impacted by COVID versus others. And there's, again, this is important to understand, not just for COVID. It might be that we are overcoming COVID as a disease if we are, but in the future, the immune system is going to be an area of huge concentration, not just because of COVID, but because of other pandemics, other potential diseases that are infectious diseases, but also with regards to many other areas, the immune system is extremely important. So you will see new insights into how people can strengthen their immune system and inflammatory potential as they go along. And what's nice about this is because this is a medical issue, a lot more attention has been paid to it, and it's easier to measure outcomes here. So we're somewhere between fair evidence and solid evidence for the personalization of preventative health within that area. So this basically brings us to a final area, which is a more fun area and also probably more ethically questionable area of using genetics and using other biological mechanisms to make decisions and personalized decisions. And that has to do with how our brain structure evolves. So when we're born with a very particular brain structure that is hereditary, and we've gotten that from our parents. Generally, it's some sort of combination of each of our parents' cognitive abilities at the time of when the sperm or the egg was produced. But also, there's also, of course, some random differences that occur just within the particular individual where you have those being quite genetic. So any person who's had 2 children or 3 children at the same time from the same family with extremely different personalities understands that a child sometimes when they're 1 year old, you can actually see that they were different. They process things differently than their siblings. So it's a lot of that is genetic, and we have some really interesting data on that in terms of how do people learn, is a person potentially a risk taker, not a risk taker, is a person potentially more analytical, less analytical, even things like math aptitude, music aptitude, and other things there's been research on that. But again, the only problem with that is the social component of cognitive development is very strong, meaning that even if a person is born with a talent or without a talent, a particular social environment can overcome a lot of those initial genetic impulses and improve on them or change them both in positive and negative directions. So the question is always, is it good to do this level of personalization or not? But again, in terms of, and these are ethical questions that one has to think of both at the individual level and at the societal level, with regards to whether these are useful things to do in terms of personalization, even if we have the science to do it. With regards to education, this might be more interesting in terms of how does a person learn. So there are different people learn in very, very different ways. I'll just talk about a personal story of mine. I used to be always in the lower 20% of students in all of the different stages of my education, in my elementary school, in my middle school, high school, even at the undergraduate level. And then the first time really when I was given the opportunity to learn very differently, this was at a time when I started my PhD at MIT. All of a sudden I blossomed as a person with regards to, I was like getting A+ GPAs and finishing like 2 masters and a PhD in 4 years. So very different experience. And the fact that throughout my 16 years of education prior, because of the mass approach to education that didn't take into consideration my unique needs, I wasn't able to blossom is on the one hand, it may be partially my fault, but also the education system was not structured for a person who was not, didn't fall within conventional structures. So the potential to personalize, and here it's not just biology, again, it's biology, it's cognitive tests that can be done to just personalize education for an individual, both in terms of contents, but also in terms of the form of delivery. Another thing that's interesting, there's right now a series on Netflix, which is called One Love, if you want to go watch it. It's a science fiction series about some scientists, mad scientists, or maybe not mad scientists, coming up with an understanding of who the perfect match would be for a person, and kind of finding that perfect match by matching people's different DNAs to each other and finding who might be a perfect match for another person. Now, although this is interesting in terms of is it possible or not, are genetics even an important factor? We do know that attraction, some parts of it is rooted in biology, but whether or not we can capture that is a different story. And then the question also, again, here becomes, what is the societal factor? What is the learning factor? What is the personal enlightenment factor that comes in? And aren't we just simplifying if we use biology, even if we add additional levels, but is that a good thing to do? And it's an open question, but many people who are on dating apps and never find a person who matches them, or number of years that humanity kind of spends trying to find a perfect match, may make it interesting to just have some additional layers of data to kind of guide a person towards a better match from a dating and romance perspective. Yet this is an area where there is still, the science is not even close to being in particular with the dating and romance. So we have a bit more with regards to things such as career choices or education, so learning styles. But with regards to dating and romance, if you see anytime soon a DNA-based matching service, kind of be more on the skeptical side. The science is really not that well. So here you see two different demarcations in terms of the science, depending on where we are focusing on. One is the dating side, and that's on the lower side of evidence. And one is, you see it says more on the fair evidence side, and that is more on the personality side, kind of impulse level side of the evidence. And with that, I get to the final topic that I want to discuss, and that's the topic of societal implications. And I think this is a topic that could have just been an entire topic in and of itself. Societal implications of personalization, societal implications of taking a person's genetics and making any kind of determinations. So of course, the first thing that comes to mind is engineering babies and what that could mean. And when people think about in those terms, do you want to engineer babies? Do you want to now take things into your own hands and start to do genetic editing and try to now find the optimal ideal baby? And of course, there's many different aspects to it, but just I will bring up some that come to my mind, and that is basically in addition to us really not knowing what we're doing. So modifying things is one thing, understanding the implications of those modifications in the longer term is very different. There's a lot of scientific uncertainty. that we're not aware of. That's one. But in addition to that, think of all the interesting people in human history who would have been basically never born if their genetics were tested. If you had a Van Gogh who would test positive on potentials for having schizophrenia, and if someone decided, if the parents were able to decide, I don't want a child with schizophrenia, the world would never have Van Gogh. The world would never have a Lars von Trier. The world will never have, most of the artists that you know are not they're not neuronormative people. They're not people who are with usual, everything is not in the middle, everything is not optimized, but these are individuals whose beautiful combinations of flaws and human and cognitive flaws and emotional issues and everything else creates the beauty of art and beauty of society that we're in. And then, of course, the other question becomes, who has this power of making these decisions? If you're familiar with the movie Gattaca, which you can see on the right-hand side, the picture of Ethan Hawke played in that movie, and that kind of identifies a society in which people are categorized from the beginning of their life in terms of what they can do and they cannot do. So people are then kind of put into different castes because of their genetics. This is, of course, something that we want to stay away from in any possible way. So having that technology, unfortunately, given that our society is still, the technology doesn't solve our social ills, it may just exacerbate them in that sense. So if we don't have governance, if we don't have really good governance, really good regulation in terms of how these things can be used, it could really end up in a pretty bad dystopia. Another area that is becomes kind of problematic right now, the entire discussion that I've had is with regards to having information to make choices. So we're talking about personalized choices based on personalization information up to now. But what if someone makes that choice and then decides that based on the scientifically available data, we are going to edit a person's genes right now and change their genes as they live, and thereby change the way the protein expression is done and potentially solve a disease, but potentially also change a person's personality in many other areas. Most of you have heard about CRISPR and Cas9. So that if you haven't, I would again highly suggest watching this series on Netflix called Human Nature. It will give you a sense of where we are, what our capabilities are. We're not talking about something changing in the next 30 years. We're talking about the next 5 to 10 years. The rate of change in terms of the biological changes, in terms of our understanding, is increasing so fast that this is kind of shifting from the realm of sci-fi to the realm of off-the-shelf products. And unfortunately, our regulatory system is not yet ready for all of that. In some cases, they are too restrictive and they don't allow innovation. And in some cases, they're too lax and people have not thought about how to look at those particular issues. So with that overall perspective, I'm going to just very quickly review what I discussed today. It's basically the ability of taking biological data, physiological data, such as wearable data, and device data, lifestyle data, and location data, and personalizing different kinds of choices for individuals using AI and big data in the particular areas of nutrition, fitness, beauty, pregnancy and parenting, preventative health, and potentially other areas such as dating, education, and career. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. If you have any questions, please send them to me, and you can actually ask questions during this session. But then for those who are not present in this session and have questions, you can always email me at ali@lifenome.com. And if you're interested in our area on precision, work on precision at LifeNome, please visit our website at www.lifenome.com. Thank you so much. Thank you, Stelios. Back to you.
Ali, thank you very much. A truly fascinating topic. And thank you for sharing with us all these wonderful insights and for showing us the future of health and actually the future of so many areas of life and what we should be experiencing more and more in our lives. Health and well-being choices that are hyper-personalized, smart health, smart fitness, smart nutrition, smart living, and collecting info on personal traits and details, and through AI provide person-specific solutions, products, and services. You spoke about data resources and data sources on the biology of each individual. One question might be, could you please expand? Of course, we do understand different ways through which that data can be retrieved. But could you please expand a little bit more through DNA testing, through medical exams, through personal submission of personal details? Would you be able to expand a little bit more on ways through which personal data and details are retrieved?
Yes, absolutely. So this is a very good question. So one of the, there are different data sources on the biology side. One of them is the DNA. And the DNA can be tested either kind of through commercial DNA testing, companies such as 23andMe, AncestryDNA, and others who provide the service in the US. What's quite interesting is around 48 million people in the US already have DNA data that they've done because they wanted to know their ancestry information from these DNA data, and some of them wanted to use it for health purposes, but the same data, which is genotyping data, can be used for personalization in other areas, in particular for nutrition and for beauty, and also for fitness. But DNA, what DNA does is DNA only provides us with data in terms of what it can provide us with. It provides us with a probabilistic assessment of what the needs of an individual may be. So a DNA predisposition does not mean that you will have a particular condition. It just means that probabilistically, you're more likely than the rest of the population to have something. Then in addition to that, we have one other source of information that's called the microbiome. And there are two types of microbiome that are kind of widely used. One is the gut microbiome, which basically tests the bacterial concentrations within your digestion tract. And one is within your gut. And the other one is a skin microbiome, which you can use in order to understand the particular characteristics of your skin or your scalp in order to kind of inform hair care and skin care. And those are, again, also commercially available, although a little bit more expensive. The DNA doesn't change. You can just do that test one time. The microbiome does change. So we want to see what happens if an individual had a particular dietary intervention before, and then after a while, we want to see how that has changed, and that will tell us whether a particular individual's nutrition has changed in a positive direction or not. So that is, the microbiome is definitely something that's going to be used a lot more. In addition to that, we have RNA potential. So RNA is more interesting than DNA in the sense that we know what has actually expressed itself in reality for the individual. And there's proteomics, which goes even further and tells us what exact proteins we each have within our bodies. So again, those are becoming more commercially available. I foresee that in the next 3 to 5 years, we will see a rise in commercial proteomics and in the RNA side of things. And that's why, for example, in our company, we don't care about this data source. We care about the layering of it with AI. So we're not a DNA testing company. We kind of take that as a data source. And the more data sources become available, the more we just layer it on top in order to do that personalization assessment. So that's on the DNA side. On the biology side, it generally involves a person collecting a sample, either themselves or to go to a lab and collect the sample. That would be if the person wants to provide a blood test, for example. It's hard to do that currently, although there are companies working on that to do that at home. Primarily, people do that at the lab, but most DNA testing is done at home. It takes 30 to 60 seconds for a person to swab their cheeks and send the sample back, for the sample data to be processed and then to be provided for personalization. An additional issue that I didn't discuss, the issue of private data privacy, is very important here. When you have your private data, private health data, genetic data, and everything else, you need to be in full control as an individual how that data is used. And there are now ways, I mean, we are working on it together with partners on ways where this data is always encrypted, never accessible to anyone outside of yourself. But for personalization, instead of providing the personalization engines with their actual data, the personalization engine sends queries where your data is analyzed, and only the output data of what products are good for you will be sent back to the personalization engine. So the personalization engine will never have your data. So the issue of data privacy is extremely important as we kind of go into the area of using personalization data for empowering our choices. We also need to make sure that we don't provide that data without our very active consent, and we understand how it's used.
So this has to do with ways through which data can be retrieved. One of, and thank you for expanding so very well on this area. Now, let's say you said that it looks like precision health and preventative health is going to impact many aspects and areas of life. You spoke about nutrition, you spoke about fitness, beauty, education, among other areas. All of these areas can be complex in the sense that a fitness facility, for example, may be composed of various hardware, software, equipment-related elements. So it looks like precision health and this hyper-personalized approach will impact pretty much everything. And it should be, of course, a top priority of companies and from within so many industries. How do you see all of those components becoming more and more advanced to be able to immediately retrieve info and at the same time adjust accordingly based on the specific person that uses them, possibly manually or through automation? What do you see all of this activity evolving into the future?
That's a very, very good question. I love that question, Stelios. This is a very important question. So the way we've done it in the past is with, for example, electronic health record systems. With electronic health record systems, you have imaging data, you have data from the hospital, you have data from the doctors, you have all sorts of data from the pharmacy, you have data from the insurance, and all of that is kind of integrated into a whole system about a person. So you have the hardware, software, governance, people, everything together, and all of it is connected through a system. And initially, when electronic health record systems were developed, they were all over the place, meaning that each company would develop their own. And then based on that, they had to, a hospital who adopted one company's technology could not then integrate with another hospital, and that created a lot of headache. So in order to get towards precision health, the ideal would be to have an open source platform that has the ability to actually integrate many, many different providers, and everyone follows the same standards and the same interfaces in order to provide the data, in order to get the data for this to be usable. Another thing that we work with a lot of corporate partners, and everyone wants their own data, their own IP, which is understandable. But what's interesting is there's a lot more to be had because a company, if you are a beauty company, or if you're a nutrition company, you don't have the ability to pay all the money that's necessary for the person to to incentivize a person to do their DNA test and do the microbiome test and do this test and that test. But what would be interesting is if everyone created an ecosystem where they would incentivize together, like hundreds of companies would kind of put in money in order for the individual to get that personalization data for nearly free. And then they could all benefit from being able to offer personalized products to that individual. So we actually at LifeNome, we encourage the companies we work with to work together. So when we work with different companies to say, don't pay for the DNA test yourself. How about we have you and 5 other companies pay for your person's DNA test, pay for their personalization, pay for the fact that they get a secure vault where they can put in their data, and then they can leverage your products and that of other companies. But the competitive advantage that you have is to be a first mover in that direction and be able to personalize nutrition or skincare or hair care or fitness for an individual. So it's about having standards, and that comes back to this open source standard. I don't necessarily believe that those standards should come from the government, but they should definitely come from the industry, setting standards for precision health as it's evolving. And we will have this field very mature in the next 5 years. So we don't have that much time to set those standards.
So given that the infrastructure that needs to be in place and everything that needs to be in place may be costly to be done in its totality, what could be an expected timeline with regards to what you feel should be expected to be seen in the future in the area of precision health? What industries do you expect to be impacted faster?
The fastest industries from my perspective are going to be the nutrition industries and the beauty industry. And these are two industries that also have the financial resources to come together and create that infrastructure if necessary. So I believe that what's going to happen is you're going to have a lot of activity in these two areas, both nutrition and beauty. And what will happen after that is this industry will probably invest significantly in these two industries will invest significantly in creating that infrastructure. And I think then other industries will follow and connect themselves to that infrastructure. And it's going to be actually to the benefit of both the nutrition and beauty industries to be at the heart of that ecosystem. So we really think that in the future, this current competitive capitalism that we see right now, where each company is trying to just do things on their own, is not going to be taking people forward, but a more ecosystem capitalism where you leverage each other's resources, provide the same data for everyone to be able to do research on, but they're creating your IP based on how you process that data, not based on the access to data, is going to be how things are going to evolve.
Absolutely. Ali, thank you very much once again for your time. Your super fascinating and interesting presentation as part of the Leading Entrepreneurs of the World series. Congratulations on all of your success today. And we are excited to continue supporting LifeNome and admiring your research, innovation, and growth. Thank you. And we look forward to speaking with you again soon. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much. Thank you.